The first postcard arrived in a plain white envelope. The handwriting on the front was neat, almost overly so, spelling out my name and address with crisp pen strokes. I nearly missed the small postmark in the top right corner, which read only Shoreline. It was more than a curiosity. The friend who vanished, Nadia, had once lived near a rocky coast she adored. Though no detail matched the address on the card, there was no return address at all. At first I assumed it was junk mail. I placed it on the kitchen counter and didn't open it until hours later, when I realized the envelope remained unsealed. Inside lay a single postcard of a partially collapsed lighthouse. Instead of a message, it had a single line written in the same neat lettering. "I'm in danger." There was no signature, but I recognized Nadia's sense of restrained panic, the same mixture of fear and sarcasm that would haunt me from time to time. 2 years ago, she'd dropped out of sight without warning after burning bridges with her parents and abruptly moving out of state. Over those years, I'd tried to track her down. Friends called, old classmates, old neighbors. No trace. It was as though Nadia had never existed at all, beyond some half-remembered photos. Eventually, I believed she'd gone somewhere overseas, or that she was living under a different name. The postcards, however, suggested something far more sinister. Debating my next step, I decided to text her old phone number. The message never went through, as it had so many times before. By midnight, the postcard still taunted me from my desk, the photograph of the battered lighthouse scraping at the edge of my mind. I'm in danger. 2 days later, another postcard arrived. This time, the envelope had a damp ring around one edge, and the postcard showed a close-up of a cracked, water-stained window. A single droplet of water trickled down the glass in the image. On the back, again in that almost unnerving handwriting, was a question. "Do you remember when I said the ocean terrified me?" I did remember. Nadia's fear of deep water bordered on phobia. She joked that every time she looked at the ocean, she saw the reflection of her worst nightmares. The message on the card, like the first, was chilling in its simplicity. That was how Nadia communicated when she felt desperate. Plain wording, a question that pointed to some deeper secret. These postcards were personal, specifically addressed to me, filled with references only she and I would understand. But the part that struck me most was they lacked any direct mention that the writer was Nadia. Yet I knew who they were from. I took the second postcard to the police station in our small town, greeting the officer on duty. I laid out the 2 postcards before her and explained my suspicion. My friend, long missing, appeared to be in trouble and was sending cryptic pleas for help. She eyed me carefully, and perhaps because of my nervous stammering, she asked if I was sure these postcards were actually from Nadia. There was nothing to do, she said, other than file a missing persons report, so I did, attaching the postcards as potential evidence. I left the station feeling uneasy. The postcards themselves were bizarre, but everything about their style, the old-fashioned images, the crisp handwriting, felt more like a performance than a spontaneous plea. I tried to track the postmarked shoreline, but research told me it could be any one of a dozen small port towns that had once used that labeling. It seemed deliberately unclear. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about Nadia's final months before she vanished. She'd been anxious, paranoid even. She claimed someone was after her. She'd confided in me about an ex-boyfriend who had turned menacing. Then one day, she was gone. The sequence continued unrelentingly. Another postcard arrived the next day, and then another, and then another. Always in the same unsealed white envelope. Always with that spidery handwriting. Always referencing something Nadia and I had once shared. On the 3rd day, the washy snapshot on the card depicted a figure standing on a beach at sunset. The sun was so bright, it almost burned out the figure's silhouette. The caption read, "People can vanish into the horizon faster than you think." My chest tightened as I read it, remembering how Nadia used to say she wanted to fade into a distant horizon and never be found. By the 5th day, I had lined them all up on my kitchen table. The half-ruined lighthouse, the water-stained window, the lonely beach silhouette, and a rising tide shot from a high cliff angle. Each photograph resonated with something from Nadia's life. The messages on the back grew more desperate. "Will you find me? The water's rising. Beware the undertow. They were short, urgent, evocative of drowning or being trapped somewhere near the water. When I tried to picture Nadia, I remembered the perpetually cold hands she'd wrap around a cup of tea, her curt, nervous laugh as though she expected to be struck by lightning at any moment. Perhaps the ocean was the symbol of whatever had her cornered. Something or someone had forced her to hide, and now all that remained were these postcards. A week passed, and the postcards didn't stop. Each morning, the mail arrived with the same unsealed envelope. I began losing sleep, waiting for the knock of the mail carrier. The messages became not just ominous, but vaguely accusatory. One read, "I waited for you. Why didn't you come?" And another, "We should have told the police sooner." Then, "Is your silence protecting me or you?" I shuffled them during a sleepless midnight, checking if the implied guilt was aimed at me or if Nadia was blaming herself. Nadia was the one who'd vanished, but I still felt strangled by the regret that I hadn't found some way to keep her safe before she disappeared. In those restless hours, I hunted for any lead, scouring social media. She used to go by Nads, used to post constantly about local gigs and cafes. But her profile hadn't been updated in nearly 2 years. No one had posted on her wall. Every lead I chased evaporated into dead ends. Even the old boyfriend's phone number was disconnected, and I discovered from a mutual acquaintance that he'd moved out of state. The only link to her life now lay in these postcards. I decided to call her mother, though Nadia had been estranged from her family. It felt right to share the postcards, as her mom should know, but as soon as the older woman picked up the phone, her voice was raw and trembling. She told me she'd been receiving them too for the past 4 days, but the messages she got were different. They were more abrupt, almost furious. "You left me. Mother, what have you done?" There was no explanation, just ominous lines that had driven her mom into near grief-stricken panic, yet they were obviously from the same source. I met Nadia's mother at a cafe the next morning, and she laid her stack of postcards on the table. Every single one depicted water in some form: a waterfall, a leaky drainage pipe, a dripping faucet. The one that chilled me most showed a waterlogged diary on wet pavement. The message on the back: "You can't wash away your regrets." Seeing how Nadia's mother trembled, I tried to reassure her, but I knew none of us had any definitive answers. We parted ways, promising to stay in touch if anything else arrived, but I sensed something else in the woman's eyes, guilt hidden behind watery sadness, as though maybe there was more to Nadia's disappearance than I knew. On the 10th day, my postcard arrived with a particularly disturbing image. An underwater photograph of a face pressed against a window, pale lips parted as though screaming. In the murky water, it was impossible to tell who the person was. The single line scrawled on the back said, "They're here." My hands shook. I called the police again and told them about the escalating nature of these messages. Whether it was Nadia or someone pretending to be her, it felt like a threat. They asked if I had any idea where she might be or who might send these. I repeated my speculation about the ex-boyfriend, a controlling presence who had once threatened her if she ever left. They promised to look into it. Then they advised me to stay on alert, to let them know if any new clues emerged. That night, I slept with a phone by my pillow, drifting into nightmares of being submerged in cold, dark water, a trembling figure floating just out of reach. I woke gasping for air, sweat slick on my neck. The postcards had begun to warp my sense of reality. When I closed my eyes, I pictured Nadia's trembling smile, or recalled the final text she'd sent me. "I'm not safe. Call you soon." That was 25 months ago. I never received that call. When the next postcard arrived, it showed a decrepit pier with wooden planks half rotted, leading into a dark sea. It almost looked like a diving board, as if inviting an irreversible plunge. The brief caption: "I'm on the edge. The next day, I'm almost gone." I realized with a sudden chill that each line was counting down, hinting at a final cataclysm. The message was mutating from a cry for help into a slow, daily torment for me, and possibly for Nadia's mother. I didn't know if these postcards were a hoax, an abuser's cruel trick, or if it was Nadia herself forced into sending cryptic messages in some twisted form of psychological. And yet, I could do nothing but wait for the next one to arrive. Eventually, Nadia's mother called me, her voice shaking. She'd gotten a postcard that just said, "If I vanish, bury me at sea." She almost dropped the phone reciting those words. I felt a pang of dread. Did it mean Nadia was in mortal danger, or was it a manipulative riddle from someone else? I hardly slept that night, mind racing with the possibility that Nadia was still out there, held captive in some seaside location, forced to send these postcards. Her kidnapper might be letting her communicate just enough to torture us with the knowledge we were helpless. Or Nadia might be alone, sending these postcards as a last lifeline, though I couldn't fathom why they were so cryptic. Was she leaving clues hidden in the images? Staring at each one, I tried to discern patterns, but if there were any hidden codes, they eluded me. After 2 weeks of these postcards, I decided to take a step beyond the police's half-hearted investigations. I researched every postmark that said shoreline, tracking down historical data from old postal routes. It led me to an obscure corner of the state, near a decommissioned naval base once used for ocean rescue training. The defunct post office in that area apparently still handled occasional mail. It was the only lead I had. Burning with adrenaline, I got in my car at dawn. My plan was flimsy at best. I would drive to that old coastal region, see if I could find leads, perhaps talk to locals, show them one of the postcards. Anything to track Nadia. I left a voicemail for Nadia's mother, telling her what I intended to do. She didn't respond. The drive took half the day, culminating in a gravel road that skirted a jagged shoreline. The air had a biting chill, and the crash of waves against the rocks was menacing. The sky was pale, and seagulls circled overhead in ragged loops. Eventually, I found a tiny post office. When I showed the woman behind the counter the postcards, she squinted at the postmarks and claimed they might have come through here. But the volume of inbound mail was too high to say for certain. No, she didn't remember seeing envelopes with that handwriting. Feeling the onset of despair, I roamed the area. The shore was bleak, dotted with abandoned structures. One, a shuttered gift shop, contained racks of old postcards featuring the local lighthouse, the battered pier, and other oceanic scenes. With mounting concern, I recognized some of them from my stack, slightly different angles, but it was possible. If someone had scrounged these postcards from a defunct gift shop, that might be how they ended up in my mailbox. Yet that told me nothing about who was sending them or where Nadia might be. Nightfall approached, and I booked a room in the only motel nearby, determined to keep investigating at daybreak. The walls of my room were thin, and the heater rattled. Sleep was fitful, filled with half-waking illusions of postcards drifting like dead leaves. At some point past midnight, I was startled awake by the sound of footsteps outside my door. I crept to the window, heart pounding, but only saw a shadow vanish around a corner. In the morning, I swept the hallway and found a slip of paper pinned to the motel door. Same handwriting again on a fragment of a water-stained letter. "You're close. Don't stop." My heart pounded so hard I had to lean against the door for support. There was no question now. I was being watched. I left the motel in a hurry, scanning the area for onlookers. The streets were nearly empty, the wind off the ocean stinging my cheeks. Gut instinct told me I should get back in my car and drive home, that I was wading into something too big. But some deeper impulse pushed me on, compelled me to find Nadia and solve this twisted game. I drove along the coastal highway, heading toward the lighthouse that matched the postcard. After some confusion at unmarked roads, I parked near a rickety padlocked gate. A chain-link fence separated me from a narrow path leading toward the lighthouse, its tower looming in the distance like a bleached bone. The wind howled, rattling the fence, and I could see waves slamming into the cliffs below. The gate wasn't fully locked. Someone had wrenched the chain loose. I stepped through cautiously, my breath turning to fog in the cold morning air. As I continued along the path, the roar of the surf grew. A sense of dread prickled the back of my neck, yet I kept going. The lighthouse was abandoned, windows shattered, paint flaking off the bricks. An unmarked wooden door stood slightly ajar at the base of the tower. I hesitated, adrenaline pumping, then pushed it open. Inside, it was dark except for the narrow slits of light from the broken windows. The walls were damp, black with mold in places. The air smelled of stale salt. My eyes strained to see. Carefully, I climbed the spiral staircase that led up to the top. The boards under my feet creaked ominously. At the top, the observation chamber was in disarray. A shattered lantern lay on the floor. The lens apparatus was rusted beyond recognition. But something else caught my attention. A small, makeshift table with a stack of postcards, blank envelopes, and a fountain pen. My heart hammered as I crept closer. These were the exact kind of postcards I'd been receiving. My hand shook when I picked one up. It showed a rocky beach with dark waves. There was no message on the back. Yet. Footsteps. Behind me, a scuffling noise. I turned, expecting to confront an attacker. Instead, out of a pocket of shadow, a figure stepped forward. My entire body tensed. It was Nadia. Her hair was stringy, dark circles beneath desperate eyes. She looked thinner, frail, but unmistakably herself. Yet something about her expression was terribly off, some mix of exhaustion and bitterness. Exhaling sharply, I rushed forward, wanting to embrace her, but she put up a shaking hand. "You came," she murmured, voice almost lost in the howling wind outside. "You finally came?" Relief flooded me, yet a torrent of questions emerged. "Nadia, what? Are you okay? What happened? Why the postcards?" She pressed a hand to her forehead as though dizzy. "He forced me to hide," she whispered. "That ex of mine, he found me again. I had to vanish. I needed help, but I couldn't risk calling or texting. He was monitoring everything. I thought if I sent postcards, maybe you would figure it out." Her voice caught. "But you took so long." Confusion and guilt flared in my chest. "I tried, Nadia. I told the police. Nobody could find you. I came here as soon as I had a clue." She looked around, eyes darting to the shattered windows. I've been sending them so you wouldn't forget me, in case something happened. I thought you'd piece it together sooner, that you'd realize I was near a lighthouse, near the battered pier, somewhere on this coast. But then he told me." Her voice broke. She buried her face in her hands. Gently, I placed a hand on her shoulder. She trembled under my touch like a wounded animal. "There's more." She lowered her hands, eyes burning with fear. "Mom was part of it. She blamed me for Dad leaving. She's the one who told him I'd taken out a small savings and moved out of town. Then she helped him track me, said if I just gave him what he wanted, some money, I could be free. But it was a lie. He was angry, thought I betrayed him, threatened me. There was nowhere safe. I felt heat rise in my chest. Nadia's mother had lied to me, withheld how intimately she was involved. I had no idea." She gave a bitter laugh. "I didn't either. Not until I found receipts, seen the messages between them. The wind rattled the top of the lighthouse, sending dust swirling around us. He threatened to kill me if I tried to run away. Then he demanded I lure you here." My blood ran cold at her words. "Lure me?" She nodded, tears glimmering in her eye. "I never wanted you hurt, but he believed you were the only person who could get him the money. Or expose him. He was terrified you'd do something, so he forced me to mail those postcards day after day to torment you, to make you desperate enough to come here." Fear seized me. "Where is he now, Nadia?" As if in response, a sudden bang sounded from below, echoing up the spiral staircase. My heart lurched. Nadia's eyes widened in terror. We both knew who was here. We heard footsteps on the lower steps, methodical, heavy. A male voice called out, "Nadia, I know you're up there, and you brought a little friend." She gasped, gestured for me to hide. There was precious little cover in the cramped, circular chamber. I ducked behind the rusted lens mechanism while Nadia stood by the table of postcards, trembling. My pulse hammered in my ears. Seconds later, a man stepped onto the landing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a coarse expression that matched Nadia's descriptions of her ex. His gaze snapped to her instantly. He was holding a length of metal pipe in one hand. With a predatory sneer, he took a few steps closer, ignoring the howling wind that whistled through the window seams. "What did you tell them, Nadia?" he demanded, voice echoing ominously. "I said you'd better stick to the plan or you'd regret it." She tried to steady her voice. "I told you I was doing what you asked. I sent the postcards, didn't I? They're here now." She gestured vaguely, though she didn't look at me. "Just let us finish this." His face twisted in anger. "You think I'm stupid? I saw another car outside. You gave them enough clues to come after you." He kept advancing, footsteps pounding, his pipe scraping against the stone wall. My mind raced. We couldn't stay hidden forever. If I tried to dash down the stairs, I'd be an easy target. My only hope might be surprising him. Carefully, I looked around for anything I could use as a weapon. There was an iron lever from the old lighthouse mechanism near my foot. Quietly, I gripped it. Nadia tried to distract him. "Look, I promise I'll do anything. Just, you don't have to hurt anyone else," he snarled. "Shut up. You dragged your friend into this. I can't let them leave now." I inhaled, willing my heart to slow. I counted down in my head. 1, 2, 3. Then I lunged. My foot tore loose from behind the rusted apparatus, and I swung the iron lever with every ounce of strength. The metal connected with his shoulder. He let out a pained roar, staggering sideways. Nadia yelped. He turned to see me, eyes ablaze with fury. "You!" He raised the pipe, and I barely jerked aside in time to avoid a blow that might have crushed my skull. It clanged against the old table, scattering postcards. Nadia shrieked and rushed forward to push him. Her shove caused him to slip on a thin layer of moisture, and he toppled, slamming into the spiral railing. The pipe fell from his hand, clattering to the floor. Seizing the advantage, I lunged forward again, striking his wrist so he couldn't grab the weapon. He cursed, lashing out with his free hand, catching me in the ribs. Pain shot through me, but I managed to keep hold of the lever. Nadia kicked the pipe away. We had him cornered, but he was furious, and I could see him trying to gather strength for another attack. "We can walk out of here," I said, my voice tight and steady. "Or I call the police and you go away for kidnapping and assault." "Your call." He spat on the ground. "She was mine," he snarled. "You had no right." A siren cut through the raging wind outside. My heart caught. Someone had called the police, or perhaps they'd tracked me. Either way, flashing lights appeared beyond the windows. I could see the reflection dancing on the walls. Nadia's ex looked around frantically, realizing escape was nearly impossible. He hurled one last hateful glare at both of us before pushing off the railing, attempting to run down the stairs. But as the building shook in the storm winds, he misstepped on the decaying stair. With a sudden cry, he slammed through a rotted banister and fell to the lower level with a bone-jarring thud. Nadia stifled a scream. I hurried to see if he was still moving. He lay in an unmoving heap at the base of the stairs. The police rushed in moments later, guns drawn, shouting commands. They found Nadia and me trembling at the top of the staircase, battered but alive. It was the most surreal night of my life. Paramedics took Nadia's ex into custody. She and I were questioned for hours. Eventually, the entire tale unwound. The manipulative mother, the controlling ex, the postcards as both a desperate cry for help and a lure to bring me to the lighthouse. The police found evidence in the area, torn scraps of letters, phone logs, and quickly built their case. Nadia was taken to a hospital to recover. She was dehydrated and underweight, frazzled from weeks of psychological torment. I spent the night in a different motel, my mind reeling with everything that had happened. In the morning, I drove back to see Nadia, who was resting under a thin blanket in a private room. Relief draped over me as I saw the color returning to her cheeks. She stared at me with gratitude and a lingering fear. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice husky. "I never wanted to drag you into danger, but you're the only one who ever believed me." I squeezed her hand softly. "I'm just glad you're safe now. Will you finally come home? We can find you help, a safe place. None of this secret hidden business." She swallowed. "Yes, I want to come home." A pause. I might need you with me while I confront my mother. I don't know what I'll say. Her betrayal hurts more than anything." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. "We'll handle it together. No more postcards." Nadia managed a faint smile. "No more postcards, I promise." And for a long moment we sat in silence, the weight of the ordeal lifting, the future unknown, but free at last from that terrible hush of ominous water. Outside, in the bright corridor, a nurse passed by holding a stack of mail for patients, reminding me of the daily dread I'd felt waiting on the mail for those 2 weeks. Shivering, I rubbed my arms, chasing away the images. A battered lighthouse, a dripping faucet, a drenched face pressed against the glass. We were no longer trapped in those pictures. We were here, alive, with a chance to mend the broken lines of our lives. Nadia breathed out and closed her eyes to rest. I stepped out, certain that as night fell, I wouldn't dread the next day's post. The terror finally had found a resolution, and somewhere, deep beneath that storm-tossed ocean, the secrets and lies were sinking, hopefully never to resurface again.